Maya is seen by 5 different doctors and groups of nurses and social workers from the ER. And she comes in about 8:46 in the morning, and she's crying and screaming, and she's in a fetal position, clutching her stomach, and she is just out of her mind. And the ER doctors there start to react rather negatively to this. Beata comes in approximately 2 to 3 hours later and once again goes through the history, which Jack has been trying to relate, of all of the different visits to Johns Hopkins and all the different treatments and how everything has failed. And the only thing that has worked has been the long-term ketamine infusions. And we can try this. Can we try that? Can we try a pump? Can we try, what can we do to get our daughter out of pain? For some reason, the doctors there either review all the past records and the some 7 to 8 to 9 prior visits, and the fact that she's had surgery there to have a port implanted to help her with the ketamine infusion. But for some reason, they decide that that isn't it at all. She really doesn't have CRPS. That the mom must be making all of this up. That this is, as a nurse, who we think is the one who actually made this diagnosis, Munchausen by proxy. Textbook Munchausen by proxy. Now imagine this is an ER, the child's back there, the parents pulling their hair out, trying to explain to the hospital, this is what Jack will testify to, and Beata is trying to explain to them in an ER where they've been about 5 times before exactly all the history that's going back, that's already in their records, including records from the other hospital. Everything's there. For some reason, the doctors, nurses, and social workers ignore all of that and decide this is not CRPS, that this is the child is making it up and the parents are making it up, and then this must be child abuse by the parents. Now, the court has told you that there's pretty much a hair trigger on suspicions, and so they make the call, and that's not part of this case. You're supposed to make the call. Slightest different suspicion, you're supposed to make the call. So that's not a bad thing, whether it was right or not, at that moment. The case is about what happens after that and the failure to diagnose previously so that none has ever happened. Maya, they try to take Maya home after the first night. They're told that they need to observe the child overnight. Fine. But by the second day, Maya is still in pain. They do knock her out with a lot of drugs to get rid of the initial pain. And they give her ketamine. So the next day, she's much calmer. And so then they decide that Maya cannot go home. They decide that taking her home is AMA, against medical advice. And they say, if you try to take your daughter home, we're calling security. So the Kowalskis don't have much choice. They end up leaving. And the next thing they know, they're off to the races and Maya is an unbelievable journey up through and including the death of Beata. Now, what you'll notice in the records, again, the records paint a glowing report of Maya. Just how great she's doing, how much she enjoys things. What a great stay she's having. She's getting this, she's getting that. The only thing she was getting to do was play the piano. Maya knows how to play the piano. She got to play the piano, and she got to draw pictures. Every once in a while she could send a letter. If she wanted to talk to her mom, it had to be on a supervised call. She could only see her dad and her brother on pre-arranged and monitored situations. If she wanted to see, they hired an attorney, obviously. If she wanted to see her attorney, the nurses would demand that the door stay open. She never had a private moment. with an attorney. They're Polish Roman Catholic, which is about as Roman Catholic as you can get, and have a very close relationship with their priest. So the priest went in to see Maya, and he will testify that when he arrived, he was told that he could not see Maya, and that she had had her religious artifacts taken away. We have a photograph of it. And he asked about this, and they said it's because we believe her mom is controlling her through religion. And so he was not allowed to see her that day. And it took a few other attempts, and then finally he was allowed in, but he was told no religious procedures. You come say hello, no religious procedures. I told you already about the 42 hours of being placed in a darkened room and told, this is a new type of EEG, Maya. We're gonna really figure this out if this is in your mind or not. No, it wasn't. It was the surveillance room. And again, the goal, because these doctors had somehow gotten confused to think that CRPS includes paralysis. Paralysis is not part of CRPS at all. And yet, they were trying to prove that Maya could actually get out of bed, that she was faking it, that she was sitting in that wheelchair all the time, just, I don't know what reason, but she was faking all this. That actually, when nobody was watching, Maya was getting up out of that chair and walking around everywhere. So they put the commode just a little bit out of reach, right? Figuring, when she thinks nobody's watching, she'd get up and she had to go to the bathroom, go over there. Well, that didn't happen. And you'll see video of Maya having to be carried over to the commode. Of course, her skin started to show the lesions again. Maya started on a dive. Badly getting worse. Depressed. The lesions are forming. You'll see them. Here... now they just may look like scratches here, but you can't see too much of the stuff on the back. What you'll notice through the series of photographs, and thank goodness Dad here took photographs of Maya's lesions, and you'll see those photographs, and I want you to compare them to the medical records, because you'll see on the dermatological reports, you'll see skin normal, and yet you'll have photographs from that day showing lesions. On January 6th, they decided that they needed photographs to prove that Maya really didn't have as many lesions as they said. So they brought someone else in, and we have better pictures. You can see a little bit of Maya's face there. They claim, oh, this didn't bother her at all. There was no authorization from the family, no notification to the family. Maya was screaming bloody murder not to do this because it hurt. They took off her clothes except for her training bra and her shorts, pulled down her shorts, pulled up her shorts there to take photographs of her. Now their testimony is, oh, this wasn't bad on her at all. She was fine with it. No, what she's told is, if you don't let us take photographs, you're not going to see your mom. That's what they told her. So they end up taking photographs, and somehow, where are the photographs? We've only got a few. We do have photographs from the father at the time, however. So, by this point, it's pretty bad. Let's talk just briefly about Beata. During this period of time, Beata is only allowed to talk to her daughter. Hopefully we'll be able to play some of the tapes where we'll be able to hear Beata trying to talk to her daughter. But they put certain things off limits, like, how are you doing? How is your treatment? How is your medication? Things like that. No, you can't talk about that. Not allowed to talk about that. They're the most mundane things you can imagine on these telephone calls. We are allowed to use them. And in those, you'll hear one of the social workers, Kathy Beatty, who was assigned Maya. Now, she was a social worker from one floor, but wherever Maya went, Kathy Beatty followed. And we have the trail of emails and notes leading from notification to the general counsel, through risk management, on down to one of the senior doctors, down to Beatty, about doing this stuff, including what you just saw there in the photograph. We'll prove they knew it at the highest levels. Beata is going freaking nuts, the evidence will show. They find out that Beatty's had some disciplinary problems. They find out, kind of through the grapevine, how bad things are for Maya. They find out about the lesions. Now her feet are completely turned in. And Maya has become so weak, the CRPS has developed to the point where she can't sit up straight. Okay? Now, on the evening of January 7th, Beata, they were going to a party. Jack and Kyle were going to a birthday party, I think. And Beata had been not acting herself at all for a number of days. And she didn't want to go to the birthday party. She didn't really want to go anywhere for a long time. The only thing she did was go to work. She was withdrawn. She and Jack had been having screaming fights because Jack did not want her to be so absorbed in this. He was more of the, let's just try to get her out of there, work her out. And Beata was trying everything, legal, social, every possible way to get her child out, and her child was not coming out. And she found out through several sources the condition that Maya was in and what was happening to Maya. And on that evening, once they were out, she decided to take some belts and put them together, go out to the garage, make a noose, put a stand below her feet to be able to reach it. She took an IV of saline solution and put the IV in her arm and left a cell phone with a note that said, retribution, retaliation, out. And she left 2 suicide notes, which we'll try to bring before you, telling you about why she did it. It took probably about 22 minutes, according to pathologists, to strangle to death. She'd kicked the stand out from under her. When Jack and Kyle got home, they thought that she was sleeping in another room, which they did a lot, because they weren't getting along, frankly. And so nobody did that. And then Beata's brother was coming in that night. He came in and just went to sleep. Got up the next morning, walked out into the garage, I guess looking for something. And at first he thought it was a Halloween costume or something. And he looks closer and it's his sister. And he, of course, just completely screams out. Jack comes in, sees his wife with Kyle right behind him. Kyle was, I don't know, we'll ask him how much he was able to see. 911 call made. You'll hear that. And Beata is taken down. We'll have some, we're not going to get gross on them. I'm not going to try to upset you too much on the photos, but we will show you some of the photos, right? Okay. Now, after that, Jack says, let my daughter go. If Beata is the big reason here, if she's the Munchausen by proxy, why keep Maya? No. It takes another week and a half, and Maya, let me get this straight. Maya's actually told in the hospital that her mom's dead. Johns Hopkins believes it's still in her head, and there's a text that goes around about how Maya's now better off because her mom's dead. Between 2 of the doctors you'll hear testify. Finally, after a lot of effort, Maya gets to go home. Now, I'm not sure if I got the photograph on this, but I'll show you a photograph. You can see on the ride home, she's got stuffed animals underneath her, and she's slumped over like this because she's so weak she can't keep herself up. Through the course, then, okay. All right. So the hospital will now come in and tell you just how great their therapies were. We'll show you the records, and they were not doing any therapies with Maya. They were warehousing the child. Maya gets home, and with her parents' care, and one other thing, the hospital doesn't want any more use of ketamine ever again. And we'll get into the details of that. So just using the old, regular, and largely ineffective pain meds, this child manages, through warm water therapy and being home with support and love, about 8 months to get out of the wheelchair. Now, folks, I want you to compare that to the time after they first learned about how to use the ketamine, how fast it took to get her ready to roll, right? Out of pain. This child does it in extreme pain. So she's on crutches here about the spring of
August of 2017.
Yeah, August of 2017. And it takes another year until Maya can walk unassisted. She's on crutches. One tough cookie, and we'll talk about just how tough she really is to be able to go through all this. Things go well for another couple of years, but in 2020, she has another bit of bad news about her schooling and has yet another relapse. This time, again, similar to the one in 2016, and similar, it was an emotional issue. The one right before she went into Johns Hopkins, all the bad stuff happened. Pretty much the same type of symptoms, and she ends up back in the hospital, and she has to be put on a feeding tube because she's in so much pain she can't feed herself. So, fortunately, after about a week there, she was able to get well enough to come out and proceed on her way, and again had to start over in some ways, and was able to rejoin a lot of her life. Without her mother, Jack lost a wife, Kyle lost a mother, and the effects on the family are, well, you'll just have to listen to hear. Okay? So, we're asking for damages for the physical injury, the overwhelming pain, not simply from the ketamine alone, but from the aggravation of the ketamine. Let me talk about this. Now, the CRPS started before Johns Hopkins ever got fixed, okay? But the evidence from every doctor that's a specialist in it will tell you that it is vitally important during the first episode of CRPS that you properly manage it in order to prevent an aggravation of the disease to the point where it's going to reappear, and you will have longer, more frequent, and more devastating episodes down the road. The ketamine's nickname is the suicide disease. So, the law is, then, that if you take a symptom, an illness, or an injury, and you aggravate it to the point where that person has a lot more pain, a lot more trouble with it, that unless some doctor can come in and identify the percentages back and forth, they're on the hook for the whole thing. All the ramifications. So now we've got long-term effects, and we're going to give you mortality tables so you'll be able to know how many years out. I'll give you some formulas on how to try to do this. I'm just an advisor. You ultimately will make all the decisions here, right? But I'll try to help with some formulas of how you can calculate such things. It's a difficult job. We talked about this in voir dire, right? All right. So we'll talk about each and every one of these. We'll talk about the physical injuries. We'll talk about, and Jack has, I haven't spent any time on Jack, but we'll get into that again on the testimony. Suffice to say, it's been devastating to not have his wife and the mother of his children. Kyle's lost a mom, and the effects on him. So we'll talk about the pain and suffering, the mental anguish that you will carry around, they will carry around from not having a mother and knowing your mother killed herself for you. We'll have inconvenience. Now, Beata was a nurse, so she could take care of herself, and she could take care of her family. She's not around. Loss of capacity to enjoy life. There's this thing called alhedonia, which means that you lose the ability to have pleasure out of things that once gave you pleasure. Maya tried figure skating. She won't do that anymore. Maya's not going back to gymnastics. Maya doesn't want to play piano anymore. The family doesn't want to go back to the church. And the family is having an extremely difficult time staying in the house, obviously. There's diminished earning capacity because what happens on your job if every year or two or every 6 months you have this debilitating episode where you can't work and you can't explain how long it's going to be and whether you're going to be able to do anything at home or not. And like I talked about, the aggravation of the pre-existing symptoms and the illness. So then we ask you to consider punitive damages. Our argument is this, that these actions are so completely and utterly it's designed to deter, not only here, but in the future. And it's designed to punish, right? And so your decision there would be predicated on how much money does it take if we got to that point. What alters behavior of companies like that? So, that's your job, is to figure a little bit out about this, a lot about this. And so I was trying to figure out where the defense is going on this. I think it is that from their doctor's point of view, those doctors in the ER and hospitalists' view, Beata was crazy, and they thought she was going to try to hurt her daughter. They haven't explained, like, Maya did not come in with a bruise, a bump, a cut, a scrape, any bad medical tests, no bad blood work. And yet they deduced from their discussions with her over the course of a few hours that it was actually her to blame. We will show you that up until this point, periodically through the latter probably 10 years of her life, Beata had had periods of anxiety, and she got treated with things like Xanax for that. And she had 2 periods of depression where she had some anti-depression stuff, never long-term and all situational to events in her life. After January of 2016, and her daughter had been through this, she sought counseling and maintained counseling to try to get through what she was going through. We'll have Dr. Tashana Duncan come in. Circumstances about her. She's a PhD psychologist who knew the story and did an intensive amount of research, and she says there was nothing wrong with Beata whatsoever. And not a single psychiatrist or psychologist is going to come in and tell you any different here. And we doubt you're going to hear anything from a psychologist or psychiatrist to say that that Maya was making any of this up, or that she was suffering from factitious disorder or conversion disorder. We doubt, seriously, you'll hear that. And if the defense does come up with something, listen to my cross. They say that the amount of ketamine that the CRPS doctors were using, and the fact of the ketamine, as they call it, the ketamine coma. It's kind of in this case that's their boogeyman. Is the ketamine coma. You'll hear one of the doctors say that that's the reason why they should be able to take Maya away from the parents, just because they didn't think that was that was met the Johns Hopkins standard of care. So because it didn't meet their idea of how to treat CRPS, their argument is that that justifies taking the child away. So what else? I think they're going to try to say that because their medical records said CRPS here and there early on and then down the road, that they were justified for billing $536,000 for a disease that they vigorously deny she ever had, and instead was always in her head. I think what they're going to say there is that, well, because some of the treatments we use can be used for CRPS, see, we could bill it. We have a memo, an internal memo, that says that they actually made a conscious decision to up their billing rate to CRPS because it's so much higher. See, CRPS takes a lot of effort to treat. You need occupational therapy, you need warm water therapy, you need physical therapy, you need psychological therapy. You've got a lot of different things that go into it. And so it's very expensive. But if you're just, evidence will show, warehousing a child while billing for CRPS, well. And you'll hear from the actual experts about ketamine infusions, why it takes so many, and what you do to determine dosage. It's called titration. Maya had pre-existing treatment by a drug that broke down the ketamine. So for what us would feel like, a Jimmy Buffett concert level of beers, to Maya would feel like 2 beers. And so that's kind of the relevance of, not a very good one, but the relevance of the ability of the steroids to break down the ketamine internally. Plus, you got to give more to kids than you do to adults. Plus, she was on this medication for about 14 months. And so there's tolerances. So the way the anesthesiologists do it, which is the way all anesthetic is done, is that you titrate up. You start on smaller doses virtually every time, and you increase until the patient has a therapeutic effect. In other words, taking them out of pain is having the right effect on them. There is no evidence anywhere that Maya Kowalski was ever in any danger. Maya Kowalski ever suffered any negative effect whatsoever. Evidence will show it is all speculation on what could possibly happen. And I believe the defense will present themselves as the saviors of this family.
You got 15 minutes left.
Fine.
Yeah,
15? Thank you. I may not even actually use it all. So, we'll lay it out. We'll bring in witnesses to tell you about CRPS. We'll tell you witnesses who spoke with Beata on her descent to the point where she felt the only way to get her child out of there, the maternal instinct was to kill herself. Take herself out of the picture, daughter released. We'll present the experts on psychiatry, on ketamine, on the use of it. We'll have the doctor flying up, the ketamine comas from Mexico. We will have psychiatrists who have studied this. We'll have the actual therapist at the time. You may actually hear from some of the doctors from the outpatient part of Johns Hopkins and some of the people that were there at the time who agreed to testify. So we'll do our very best, and we'll try to introduce video and audio and photographic evidence to document every single element of our case. So, Nick sort of serves as my walking laptop computer, reminding me of stuff when I forget it. There's much to tell you. When You've been pretty patient here listening to all of this. It's an emotional case.